The Walker House Ghost, William Caffey's Life and Afterlife. The Walker House is an imposing three-story structure located in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Since its alleged establishment in 1836, the building has changed hands many times. Originally an inn and pub, the Walker House has also been an art gallery and meeting hall over the years. The old building is expensive to maintain, which could account for the frequent shifts in management, but there may be another reason why buyers leave so quickly. Some say a tavern spirit haunts the premises, eager to avenge his death. Legend has it that after a night of drinking and partying at the Walker House, William Caffey killed his rival, Samuel Southwick, in a dramatic duel. He was then sentenced to hang next to the tavern. A few conflicting accounts say that after murdering Southwick in a nearby town, Caffey went to the Walker House to hide. Authorities found him, put him in shackles, and condemned him to hang near his old hideout. Others say that Caffey was a notorious horse thief. When he stopped at the Walker House for a drink, a mob member carried him off and lynched him. Take 2 of that slide. Others say that Caffey was a notorious horse thief. When he stopped at the Walker House for a drink, a mob carried him off and lynched him. Whatever the case may be, Caffey's got a taste of frontier justice when he was hanged outside the Walker House in 1842. His was the last hanging in Wisconsin, next to the state's oldest inn. Since then, Caffey's ghost has roamed the Walker House seeking revenge. To this day, workers at the inn see his apparition and flee in terror. What really happened to William Caffey? Was he a horse thief, a gentleman, or a cold-blooded killer? Most importantly, is he still making his presence known? The true story of the Walker House ghosts may differ from what the locals are used to, but it is just as compelling as strange. This presentation will explore the life, death, and afterlife of a Mineral Point icon. It all started at Barry's on the night of February 22nd, 1842. Adeline Barry and her husband, Fortunatus Barry, were hosting a birth-night ball to celebrate the 110th anniversary of George Washington's birthday. They invited everyone they knew to their inn and home at Gratched's Grove in what is now known as Shullsburg. As part of the festivities, the guests would participate in an advanced form of square dancing known as the cotillion. One of those to receive an invitation to the ball was William Caffey, a 29-year-old miner from White Oak Springs, Wisconsin. Bill was an aggressive and determined man, perhaps because he became an orphan at the age of 8 and was left to care for his 3 younger brothers. Although Bill could be crude and brash at times, he had a soft spot for dancing. Each dance gave miners a rare opportunity to socialize and woo the ladies. As such, Bill tried to behave himself at Barry's gatherings. But on the February 22nd party, he had too much to drink and his short temper got the better of him. He claimed he would like to kill, or at least punch, Charles Gratiot. Gratiot liked organization and insisted that callers bring only a set number of people to the dance floor at a time. Caffey hated this rule, and therefore Gratiot. He also assumed the dance caller, Amos Culver, left him out of the fun by avoiding his name. Caffey asked Amos to join him for a drink, hoping to get some answers. Culver explained that he had called Caffey's name last dance, and did not usually call names twice in a row. Caffey demanded to see the list of names. After Culver gave him the list, Caffey ran off with it, yelling, "If I can't dance, then no one should." Caffey had the list in his pocket, then went outside with his friend Charles Lamar for a chat. He warned the other party-goers not to follow him for the list, threatening, "I'll cut the goddamn heart out of any man that gets in my way." Samuel Southwick ignored the warning and started advancing toward Caffey. Southwick was the cousin of Adeline Barry and a peaceable man according to most accounts, but unfortunately for him, Southwick chose this day to strike up a fight. He picked up a piece of firewood and looked ready to swing. Caffee told Southwick to stand back or be killed. He had never met the man before, but knew instantly that he disliked him. Southwick did not move very fast, as he was a 54-year-old with a limp. Caffee pulled out a pistol almost immediately and shot him near the heart. Lamar checked in on Southwick and asked how he was doing, to which Sam responded, "I'm a dead man." Lamar turned on Caffee. "What have you done?" he asked. Bill simply said, "I told him to stand back." By now a crowd of people had gathered at the scene. Lamar tried to fight Caffee, but stopped when he shouted, "Charlie, don't you lay your hands on me," and someone in the crowd said Caffee had a knife. According to court testimony, Samuel Southwick died at 1 a.m. on February 23, 1842, a few minutes after the shot was fired. Caffee fled from the scene. After the shooting, Caffee ran to his hometown of White Oak Springs, Wisconsin. When he arrived in the area, he met Charles Lamar, Samuel Scales, and Samuel Dunbar, who had all been at the ball when the shooting occurred. They tried in vain to get Caffee to turn himself in. Lamar was a constable in the past and told Caffee he had a solid argument for a self-defense case. Caffee was unconvinced and rode off on horseback with his brother Ben. He traveled past Iowa and eventually wound up in St. Louis. During his travels, Caffee met one of a notorious band of horse thieves and counterfeiters. This encounter started the rumor that William Caffee also stole a horse. When Caffee tried to turn in the gang member and collect his substantial reward, the criminal reportedly exposed him to the sheriff as the man who shot Sam Southwick. Both men ended up in jail. On June 17, 1842, Wisconsin Territorial Governor James Doty, quote, appointed the politically connected Mississippi steamboat captain John Atchison territorial marshal, end quote. He then sent Atchison on a mission to pick up Caffee in St. Louis. He promised Atchison a $130.75 payment for returning the prisoner. The next month, Atchison arrived in Mineral Point with Caffee, but never received any money. Caffee's trial began on September 13, 1842, in a small log courthouse in Mineral Point, the Iowa County seat at the time. Judge Charles Dunn presided over the court. Attorney General Mortimer Melville Jackson served as the prosecutor, claiming that all the circumstances of this case conspire to establish, clear as the sun at noonday, and as strong as Holy Writ, the proof of the prisoner's guilt. Moses Strong served as the defense attorney, assisted by mine owner Lorenzo Bevins. John Blackstone, Fortunatus Berry, R.C. Buzzin, Laban Cassidy, Amos Culver, William Daring, Bayan Graccio, Carls Graccio, Edward Graccio, J.R. Graccio, Samuel Huddleston, Charles Lamar, David Lufkin, and Joseph Scales were among the many who took the witness stand. Each of their testimonies matched up, with the exception of Joseph Scales. While the rest of the witnesses stated that Southwick did not hit Caffee, Scales thought he saw Caffee dodging Southwick's blows. On September 16th, the jury pronounced Caffee guilty. He showed no emotion during the verdict, remaining cool and unconcerned. Caffee's counsel requested a second trial, so the court decided to reconvene on September 21st. On that day, the motion for a new trial began with affidavits claiming there had been some drinking going on in the jury room. This motion was overruled when the deponent, Thomas Gloucester, admitted that he had brought the liquor in the first place. On September 24th, Caffee came to the court in irons. He objected to the law clerk, "I don't think I've had a fair trial, as the evidence against me was not true." The clerk lamented that someone as young and handsome as Caffee should be sentenced to death. He expressed his sincere hope that Caffee would repent and that the execution would prevent similar incidents in the future. After insisting that the trial was indeed fair, he announced the sentence. It is the judgment of the court and the sentence of the law that you, William Caffee, for the crime of murder of which you stand convicted, be taken hence to the jail of this county, and there safely and securely kept, until Tuesday, the 1st day of November next, on which day, between the hours of 10 o'clock a.m. and 4 o'clock p.m., you shall be taken from said jail, and then and there publicly hanged by the neck until you are dead, and may the Lord have mercy on your soul. Soon after the verdict, Caffee's friends allegedly made plans to break him out of the Mineral Point jail, but did not follow through. Instead, they petitioned the governor to stop the hanging and issue a less severe punishment. Governor Doty thought that long-term imprisonment was not enough for a murderer and did not commute the sentence. In a letter to Sheriff George Messersmith, he wrote, "There is little doubt that if Caffee had not lived in a society in which the practice of carrying about the person concealed weapons was not only tolerated, but considered rather as distinguishing the gentleman than the ruffian or bully, he would not have been guilty of shedding Southwick's blood. It is painful to see the effect of this barbarous custom visited upon one so young, but I do not learn that since his confinement he has exhibited any evidence of contrition, or that he is fully sensible that his situation, which has awakened so strong a sympathy in the bosoms of his friends, is occasioned by his violation of the laws of his country, or that he is aware that those laws are supreme and that no man has the right to take the life of another for any private injury." But Caffee did not have any desire to apologize for his actions. Instead, he was hell-bent on making life difficult for his captors. Each week, a blacksmith named James arrived to re-rivet Caffee's iron shackles. Whenever he removed the constraints, Caffee threatened, "You had better be careful how you put the irons back on, for if I should get loose, you might be sorry." Caffee's claims that he would get free were not taken lightly. Mineral Point authorities stationed 4 armed men to watch Caffee's cell, just in case. Despite Caffee's rough facade, he was light-hearted around visitors. He frequently joked about his upcoming doom in a way that upset his friends and family. When his brothers came to visit him for the last time, he apologized for not taking his death more seriously. On Halloween night, the day before he went off to the gallows, he wrote letters to his loved ones asking forgiveness. He shared his account of what went down at the Berry House and his sudden spiritual revelations. Towards the end of his life, Caffee believed he was going to a better place. Convinced of his salvation, he looked forward to what awaited him on the other side. According to one account, Caffee, quote, was not without hope of happiness after his death, end quote. Caffee knew he was going home after the hanging, but was home actually the Walker House? There is a lot of incorrect information about Caffee's execution. First of all, none of the historic original accounts mention an inn or any other landmarks at the hanging location. The Walker House had not yet been built, despite its supposed establishment in 1836. Jack Hollister of the Wisconsin State Historical Society states that the building's lot, quote, wasn't even purchased from the government until 1845, end quote. Additionally, founder William Walker did not move from Ireland to the United States until 1847. Barry's Tavern, where Caffee actually shot Southwick, is much older. It is therefore safe to say that Caffee did not hang next to Wisconsin's oldest inn. Caffee also did not hang from a tree, as some versions of the story claim. Instead, a scaffold was placed on the part of the, quote, low ground below town, surrounded by an amphitheater of hills which were literally covered with the eager multitude, end quote. According to an 1893 issue of the Iowa County Democrat, the execution took place, quote, where the Mineral Point Depot now stands, end quote. This description provides the exact location of the hanging. The Mineral Point Depot, constructed in 1856, still stands today across from the Walker House. Caffey's hanging was also not the last execution in Wisconsin. John McCaffrey's hanging takes that spot, and thousands of people flocked to Kenosha to watch the murderer die in 1851. McCaffrey had drowned his wife, Bridget, in a well. In 1853, the death penalty was abolished in Wisconsin. On November 1st, 1842, thousands of curious Wisconsinites flocked to the Mineral Point hanging site. It was a pleasant fall day, and the spectators occupied themselves with picnic lunches and conversation before the grand attraction arrived. The crowd of 4,000 to 5,000 was diverse, with people of, quote, every age, sex, color, and condition fully represented. At 2 o'clock, a macabre parade assembled in front of the local jail. At the front were Major Gray's dragoons wielding pistols and sabers. Second was a band of uniformed men with muskets under the charge of Captain Shaw. Next was a series of horse-drawn wagons, one of which contained Caffey's coffin. Deputies brought him out in a long white robe and a cap, with a rope already tied around his neck. Caffey may have specially requested the robe, as white garment symbolized entry into heaven at the time. Instead of taking a seat in the front of the wagon, Caffey sat astride his own casket. The rest of Shaw's command followed Caffey's wagon. Finishing off the assembly was Colonel Sublet's company of dragoons. There must have been some musicians in the group as well, because a funeral dirge accompanied the strange procession. Caffey enjoyed the music, keeping beat to the melody by striking his coffin lid. Many accounts say he used 2 empty beer bottles, though he probably just used his fists. In either case, Caffey made himself memorable. The procession supposedly traveled down High Street and Commerce Street to the outskirts of town. A posse of 7 Black Hawk War veterans kept the crowd 30 feet away from the hanging site. They wore handmade uniforms made from blankets and bed ticking. Warren Johnson led the group with a sword that he had never gotten to use in the war. When Caffey arrived, Sheriff George Messersmith helped him up the stairs to the gallows. Reverend Wilcox, who frequently visited Caffey in prison, also climbed the stairs and prayed for Caffey's redemption in the eyes of God. Caffey showed no emotion during the whole ordeal. In prison, he had bragged about being able to, quote, stare death out of countenance. His nonchalant attitude at the hanging seemed to prove this point. During speeches and prayers, Caffey leaned casually on one of the scaffold posts till it was time for the grim ceremony to end. The sheriff asked Caffey if he had any last requests. Always the jokester, Caffey replied that he wanted the rope adjusted, quote, with a good long slack. Earlier that day, he had allegedly asked for a slice of Judge Jackson's heart as his final meal. The sheriff did the honors of pulling the cap over Caffey's face, triggering the lever on the scaffold and ending his existence. Legend has it that Caffey's friends tried to restore him to life, but he remained dead. Or did he? The Walker House may well be one of America's most haunted inns. William Caffey's spirit is said to roam the halls, appearing in various forms to guests and employees alike. According to Becky Busher, a former Walker House employee, he lives on the 3rd floor. Some people also claim to see the apparition of a little girl who plays on the upper floors with a ghost cat and ghost dog. It is unclear why they inhabit the building. Mysterious footsteps, voices from nowhere, and flying objects make the Walker House spirits seem almost cliché. But unlike most ghosts, William Caffey and his friends do not mean to harm anyone. If anything, they may be trying to help with the building. They seem to like taking part in the renovation plans, as they show up the most while the property is being refurbished. Reports of the building's strange activity began in 1964 when Ted Landon purchased the rundown property with dreams of restoring it to its original glory. The place had been abandoned since 1957, and fixing it brought unprecedented challenges. Aside from the substantial financial investment, Landon had to deal with spooky visitors while he organized repairs. He heard unknown footsteps and creepy breathing sounds that seemed to follow him wherever he worked. In 1978, Landon had enough and sold the building to Dr. David Ruff. One of Ruff's first guests, a college student from Madison, left due to hearing the doorknobs constantly rattle while he was trying to sleep. Eager for some help, Dr. Ruff hired Walker Calvert, a descendant of the original owner, William Walker, to be his property manager and chef. Calvert started noticing paranormal events right away. Most afternoons, a wooden panel covering the water pipes would slide to one side on its own before falling to the ground. It looked almost like some invisible person was inspecting the plumbing, but floating objects were commonplace compared to what Calvert would come to experience at the Walker house. In the late 1970s, Calvert had at least free chats with Caffey's ghost. Employees would hear two men talking in the dining room, but when they came in, only Calvert was there. Walker could not remember who he had been talking to or what they discussed. He spoke with the person in a semi-hypnotic state, never realizing that his conversation partner was not real. Before his afternoon discussions with Calvert, Caffey helped the employees make breakfast. Early in the morning, before anyone had started cooking, Caffey was already getting the pots and pans together. He also liked to move the bread box. The clanging noises could be heard outside as kitchenware flew across the room. Workers in the kitchen felt like they were being watched, judged even. One cook refused to work in the kitchen alone. Some employees had a difficult time getting into the building, as the door would lock on its own. Caffey usually locked up early at night, much to the dismay of Calvert and everyone working the late shift. It seemed that Caffey wanted to control who went in and out. Caffey's ghost did not appreciate crowds very much, which is understandable considering the ruckus when he died. However, he was fond of certain people and would let them in. One morning, when Walker and his wife Linda were opening up, Caffey was there to greet them with a disembodied hello. Ever the partier, Caffey made sure to keep tabs on the alcohol. A bartender on the second floor was taking stock of the glassware when he heard heavy breathing and footsteps. After asking the ghost to leave him alone, he heard the noise slowly fade away. When the waitresses served drinks, they often bumped into something invisible but substantial. Out of the corner of their eye, some of them saw a white shape. Occasionally, a beer bottle would fall to the floor without anyone disturbing it. If the legend that Caffey swung beer bottles on his coffin is true, he may have been confirming his identity. Calvert commented in an interview with Beth Scott and Michael Norman that the ghost was always doing something. It was as if he tried to prove to everyone in the Walker house that he was there, end quote. One of the ghosts, either the little girl or Coffee, loves to tug on people's ears and hair. The little girl was more likely responsible for scaring Calvert in the root cellar. On a summer day in 1981, Calvert heard someone running up and down the cellar's wooden stairs, quote, over and over again, like a child at play, end quote. The cellar was well lit with electric light, but Calvert could not see anything that could have made the sound. The walls were made of thick rock, blocking out any noises from outside. The ghost seemed to be visiting Calvert, and this was just the beginning of his encounters. One day, Calvert was working in the office when he heard footsteps approaching. They stopped at his door. When Calvert got up to open the door and investigate, he didn't see anyone. Everything was normal until he heard a low groan, which intensified into a horrendous growl. This noise might have been the ghost dog, or Caffey playing a prank. Either way, Calvert would never forget the experience. Calvert finally saw what appeared to be Caffey's spirit in 1981. It was a cool October evening, and the atmosphere was perfect for a ghost sighting. Calvert was checking the door that opened from the second-floor barroom onto the porch. As he walked outside, Calvert was shocked to find the headless figure sitting on the bench. He looked old and wore a gray mining jacket with denim pants. There was a black felt hat where his head should have been. Calvert was not concerned with the ghost's sudden appearance. He had spent so much time interacting with Caffey that he felt he knew the ghost well. Calvert recalled what he saw that day in a matter-of-fact way. Quote, "He was just a rumpled, funny-looking old man. His clothes were pretty nice, but they were old, dusty, and wrinkled. He was sitting on the bench facing me. I knew right away it was Caffey, but I didn't reach out to touch him. I didn't want to get that close." End quote. When Calvert glanced away, the man disappeared. He assumed the apparition was Caffey because ghosts of hanging victims frequently appear without their heads. The figure was also wearing a mining jacket, which makes sense given Caffey's occupation as a miner in White Oak Springs. The only thing that did not make sense is the age of the ghost. Caffey died at 29, so why was the ghost so old? In Haunted Heartland, Beth Scott and Michael Norman point out that spirits, quote, can come back at any age they feel, quote. Maybe Caffey felt like an old man after spending all those years wandering the Walker house. Oddly enough, a waitress saw the ghost of a young man a few days later. He had a head and only appeared for a couple of seconds before fading away. Perhaps Caffey wanted to flirt with the waitress by showing her what he looked like when he was alive. One employee accidentally gave Caffey's ghost a ride back to her house. Deborah Enerson said that she was leaving the Walker house when she noticed the carpooler. Quote, "I got in the car and I felt someone was there. I could hear someone breathing. I don't mind the guy. He didn't bother me." End quote. Deborah also points out that Caffey's ghost likes to come out in the morning and at the bewitching hour of 5 or 6 p.m. At those times, the pub suddenly becomes drafty. Quote, "The rest of the place can be warm, but it gets cool in there. People can feel his presence, feel him whoosh past them." End quote. In addition to Caffey's presence and the little girl's spirit, there may have been many more ghosts in the 1980s. According to the Wisconsin Road Guide to Haunted Locations, there was an exorcism there in 1984 to cast out the 7 spirits that were said to haunt the place. Apparently, the exorcism did not do much good because the sightings were far from over. The ghosts kept rather quiet in the 1990s and early 2000s. After Calvert and subsequent owners left, the property was abandoned once again. By 2002, the Walker House was on the most endangered properties in Wisconsin list. Joseph and Susan Dickinson bought the building in 2008, taking on the Herculean task of repairing years of vandalism and disrepair. In total, the Dickinsons replaced over 200 pounds of leaded glass during their restoration of the property. Oddly enough, all of that glass was broken from the inside. The Dickinsons think it was the work of vandals, but there could have been paranormal activity involved. With their hunting grounds disturbed, the spirits were on high alert. They came to like the owners, but were wary of any strangers. One day, Joseph Dickinson was away from town and asked his daughter to check in on the Walker house. It was a frigid day, so she went over to make sure that none of the pipes were freezing. Suddenly, she encountered an unknown man who told her, "Get the hell out, you're not the owner." Joseph Dickinson explained that the man was very protective of the building and sometimes acted like a supervisor while he was away. The mysterious figure stood at the top of the stairs and watched as the food was being prepared. Aside from the strange man, there were also some other unusual happenings. For example, Dickinson's grandson experienced the floor weaving underneath his feet. Visitors allegedly saw floating heads and moving chairs. The ghost messed with technology by draining batteries, making the phone ring when no one was on the line, and playing voicemails that had been deleted long ago. Cameras supposedly acted up in the Walker house. When they did work, the photos they captured featured orbs and misty wisps. The Dickinsons welcomed paranormal investigators into the Walker house, hoping that some unique publicity would bring them the funds they needed to keep the building. In 2011, the Relatively Haunted team did a special on the Walker house, where they attempted to communicate with Caffey's spirit. The Dickinsons created ghost-related newsletters and publications to help with the fundraising efforts. Unfortunately, they were unable to keep up with the cost in the Great Recession and had to give up the building. In 2012, Dan and Caffey Valancourt took over and have been running the restaurant and inn ever since. The new owners vehemently denied the existence of any ghosts. They even have a website page debunking some of the supposed ghost activity. Unlike the Dickinsons, they avoid reaching out to ghost hunters and fans of the supernatural. To them, ghost stories are just a small part of the rich history surrounding the Walker house. Whether the Walker house is haunted or not is ultimately up to the visitor to decide. The building is fascinating to explore, with or without unexplained presences and things that go bump in the night. Whatever the case may be, William Caffey's bold exploits will not be forgotten anytime soon. If they are, he might just come back to refresh our memories.